Right. Mm, just want to confirm if this was working. So let me quickly change this. Perfect. Let's give it another few minutes, guys. And before of course we start the webinar. Hope this is visible. Perfect. Alrighty, let's give it another few minutes, guys. Just another minute or two before we can get started. I'm glad that everything is pretty audible and visually coherent as well. If there's anything, please feel free to put them on the chat box if either my video or my audio isn't clear. Having said that, so let me just note down a few things. Perfect. I see a few people joining in, so that's good. All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Tasneem Ahmed, and I work in the business development team here at Parallels. Um, we are here to discuss something that is at the top of the mind for many IT professionals, and that is the complexity of traditional VDI solutions with the likes of Citrix and, of course, a lot of other players. But at the same time, more importantly, I'd love to explore in the next 30 minutes or so how Parallels really provides a better alternative that doesn't really compromise on, of course, costs and simplicity, if you put it that way, or performance in that perspective. I'd like to highlight today's discussion, having said that, which is basically around simplifying VDI and app delivery for budget conscious IT teams. And of course, just to give some context to people who are new on this webinar, I do these series of webinars on a monthly basis. So every month you'll be able to join me here. So please feel free to either stay in touch or, of course, join me in this monthly series of webinars that I'm doing via Parallels. Of course, endorsing ROS is a much more better solution compared to traditional VDI, but at the same time, giving you an analysis of how different we are from a cost and simplicity perspective. Before we get into the product and technology side of things, let me give you a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. We're going to walk through some key topics that I think you'll find both relevant and practical, especially if you're navigating through the challenges of remote or hybrid work environments. We're going to talk about the rise of hybrid work and how it's reshaping the expectations of IT infrastructure teams and end user computing teams, if you put it that way. We'll also talk about the common challenges Citrix and legacy VDI users face, from complexities and, of course, costs, flexibility, and scalability as well. We also talk about what really makes Parallels ROS that different, and how do we really add on to those cost saving methods, and how we really help simplify virtual app and desktop delivery without, of course, compromising on security, performance, or control. I'll, of course, give you toward the end a quick rundown on the architecture and management side of things, but at the same time, give you a practical overview of how Parallels ROS really functions from a user perspective, and a quick overview of course, how you would easily work on from a use case perspective as well. Of course, I'm sure you might have a lot of questions that might pop up as we go through this discussion, but please feel free to put them in the chat box. I'll either try to address them towards the end of the discussion, or of course, reach out personally to get in touch with you. And of course, make sure that we address those questions and queries as well. Having said that, I think we can actually move forward. But before we actually start off, I just wanted to give you an idea of what the goal of today's webinar really is. The idea is to really give you a solid understanding of how parallels can fit into your infrastructure and maybe even help you rethink your approach on application and desktop delivery altogether. So let's really look at what kind of decisions IT teams are facing today. Let's really take a moment to reflect on that before we actually start talking about products and the technology. The modern IT landscape is quite complex. Let's face it. It's shaped not just by strategy, but by a host of external pressures, security protocols, compliance requirements, budget constraints, and sometimes even legacy systems that are too tightly woven into the business to just walk away from. We get it. At Parallels, we don't believe in forcing companies into one size fits all approach. Every organization's infrastructure and technology is unique. Some are fully on prem, others are cloud native. Many fall somewhere in between, in that hybrid middle ground. That's why our solutions are built with flexibility at its core. Our mission is simple: to make your transitions, whether they happen all at once or gradually over time, as smooth and seamless as possible. We focus on what really matters: driving your business forward, staying secure, and keeping your users productive in a much more flexible and simple remote workforce environment. Because in the end, technology should work for you, not the other way around. So, I just want to give you an overview of something interesting that our team at Parallels ROSC or Parallels as a whole conducted. So this are some glimpses from the State of the Cloud Computing Survey for 2025, where we engaged with around 600 IT professionals around the world to really understand where their organizations were in their cloud journey and where they're headed next. One of the most striking insights that we got were the was that security and simplicity was at the top of their mind. As you see over here, some metrics. 88% of the respondents said that their organization plans to increase their security budget in the next year, and nearly half aiming for a significant increase. Another key trend that we are seeing is a shift away from public cloud. 86% of those surveyed or other considered or actively planning to move workloads away from public cloud, or basically 86%. Within that group, or 27% leaning toward a much more hybrid cloud model, while 14% are just staying on-prem. So as you see, it's a very it's a different metric, but at the same time, you need to allow a technology that fits all of these different infrastructure environments. And that's where we really talk about flexibility as a whole. And just to again look at a few more metrics, when asked where the workloads currently were living, 50% of these respondents talked about a multi-cloud environment, and 32% are operating in a hybrid setup. And of course, I think it's pretty evident that remote workforce is continuously being a driver, or a major driver, as you may put it. As of course, 85% of the companies are still in some level of hybrid or remote work environments. So, what do we understand from this? Today, hybrid isn't just about where employees work, it's also about where your workloads live. And it's really important and critical on how uh, your remote work environment adapts to this kind of a infrastructure, whether it's on-prem, private, or public clouds. Seamless access should be the key. And that's what brings me to talk about our solutions. Let's talk a bit about the the solutions in our portfolio. And I'm sure many of you who know us or who know Parallels as a brand are familiar with our legacy product, Parallels Desktop. It's what lets you run Windows seamlessly on Mac devices. It's a favorite among many developers, gamers, and anyone who prefers Windows but wants to use a MacBook. But today, we're here to talk about something different. Parallels ROS. Now, that of course comes under the virtualization category, um, or virtualization of apps and desktops category. And if you're using Citrix or traditional VDI solutions like Omnisa or Nerdio, this solution is worth paying attention to. In a nutshell, Parallels ROS or Parallels Remote Application Server is a streamlined virtualization solution for delivering apps or desktops, whether you're running on prem, in the cloud, or a hybrid setup. It offers the flexibility to integrate with your existing infrastructure, including AVD, while giving you a unified management experience across all environments. The flexibility is what makes the big difference for organizations looking for a simpler, more cost effective solution. Now, to special mention some of our other solutions as well, as you see over here, Parallels DOS, our one of our recent solutions, I would say, our cloud native desktop as a service solution. It's built for organizations that want to provide secure, flexible access to desktops without dealing with complex deployments. And because security is always a priority, we have two core security focused products. One, of course, is Parallel Secure Workspace, very similar to ROS in terms of the use cases that it solves with remote access, but limits you to a completely HTML5 browser based environment. You could call it a strong VPN replacement or a VPN alternative as a whole. And of course, we have Parallels Browser Isolation, which gives you a limited browser based experience purely for SaaS applications and identity providers. That, of course, adds an extra layer of protection. Having said that, I want to make sure that you're aware that today's discussion is solely going to revolve around Parallels ROS and how we really differ from legacy VDI solutions like Citrix. Because at the end of the day, our goal is simple to give organizations the freedom without compromising on security and flexibility. Again, before I really start talking about RAS, I just want to talk about one last thing, which in regards to the challenges that are around traditional and legacy VDI. If any of you watching or resonating with any of these challenges, please feel free to put them in the chat box just so we can try to see if RAS offers a better solution or at least a much more better alternative to resolve those challenges. So if you look back at the recent survey that I showed you a while ago in regards to the cloud computing survey for 2025, we noticed a significant transformation in the EUC landscape. As organizations grapple with high costs and outdated VDI systems, 63% are evaluating new VDI or DAS solutions, with 94% aiming to deploy a new platform within the same year. The results point to a clear trend, which is complexity, costs, and manageability. And of course, these are what are the major pain points that many traditional VDI still have. We talk about increased licensing costs, performance and reliability issues, as you see over there, and then, of course, lack of centralized control and integration of existing technologies. But of course, the fact being other reasons that traditional VDI solutions are just too complex to be managed by mid-sized teams. In contrast, Parallels ROS keeps things simple and cost-effective, and we'll get into exactly how in a bit. Let's take a moment to compare Citrix and Parallels side by side. But before we do this, I'd love to give you an overview of Parallels ROS. I think this is a much better slide. Before, of course, I talk about the differences. So amidst all these complexities of traditional VDI, Parallels ROS really brings some strong USPs to the table. Firstly, simplicity. Parallels ROS is designed for ease of use, particularly in hybrid work environments. Whether your workloads run on AVD, on-prem, AWS, VMware, or Nutanix, the deployment and management experience remains consistent. Provisioning resources in AVD might just feel like deploying on-prem. So there's no additional training or steep learning curves required. Of course, we have the flexibility. Parallels ROS adapts to your existing infrastructure with minimal disruption. Its intuitive, wizard guided console handles the complexities behind the scenes. And then, of course, we have the cost effectiveness, which I'm going to touch upon as well. Parallels ROS provides a more affordable alternative, giving you a stronger total cost of ownership to traditional VDI solutions, again, like Citrix. With a singular concurrent user model or a concurrent subscription based model, we basically give you a lot of cost savings, but at the same time, a much more easier solution to handle from a licensing perspective as well. And then, of course, we have the user experience. No matter what device or operating system you prefer, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, or a browser, Parallels ROS really delivers a consistent, responsive experience. I'll, of course, show you that in a bit from a practical viewpoint as well. But to give you an idea, users can securely access applications, whether it be SaaS or, of course, legacy applications or desktops through native clients or HTML5 browsers, totally dependent on how they want to use it, ensuring seamless performance across all devices. I think that's an additional uh, aspect of ROS that many people overlook. And then, of course, we can't forget about security. Security is not just an add-on; it's fundamental to our solution. Built-in security features like MFA and SSO that ROS brings to a table protect your data, your users, and infrastructure at every level. From access policies to secure gateways, our platform is designed for enterprise grade protection. So you're not really sacrificing on security, relying on a much more simpler solution like ROS. Now, before, of course, I talk about the actual core differences from a cost perspective, let's really look at it from a side by side perspective on what really differentiates Citrix and Parallels ROS. Starting with licensing, right? Citrix requires a universal license just to enable hybrid environments. In contrast, Parallels ROS simplifies this with just one license that supports hybrid use out of the box. When it comes to integration with AVD, Citrix replaces the AVD control plane, introducing another layer of, what you would say, complexity or management. Parallels integrates natively with your AVD, meaning less disruption and faster setup. Citrix also pressures customers to migrate to Citrix Cloud sometimes, while Parallels ROS really gives you the freedom to manage your solution from anywhere. Well, with Parallels, one license covers concurrent users, whereas of course you can be a bit complex with the licensing that Citrix really gives you, whether it's depending upon the number of users you have, of course. And let's not forget the fact that Parallels is much more cost effective, and I'll show this to you in a bit on why or how we're actually cost effective. But at the same time, Citrix really can be time consuming to learn. And it's nothing against the solution, but it's just a complex solution to learn, manage, and to be trained. Whereas ROS simplifies this by offering you a much more simpler training path, free resources, and free training to all members of your team. Again, just adding on to that total cost of ownership from a product's perspective. Finally, Citrix often involves a complex mix of components or a complex mix of elements to handle and manage, whereas again, Parallels keeps life simple, keeps everything more streamlined, fewer components, and lesser stress for your team. Okay, before we actually talk about the technical bit, let's really look at ROS from a cost savings perspective. At first glance, if you look at this picture over here, um, what you see is visible costs. Like based licensing. Let's look at everything above the water level over here. Annual support contracts and initial software purchases. Many seem similar. However, as we dive deeper, the differences become clear. You see over here below the water. On the left, we see Citrix. The visible costs are only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface lies a substantial portion of hidden costs. Of course, compared to RAS, which is much more simpler, less hidden costs, I mean, almost none hidden costs, and everything apart from the license itself is free for you to handle. So, not only are these invisible costs or, yeah, additional costs completely different when you talk about the RAS and Citrix infrastructure, Rust in the end gives you a much more stronger and better total cost of ownership. So in short, Parallels Rust doesn't just offer a lower upfront costs, it reduces the hidden ongoing costs and then of course surprise costs that often organizations using traditional VDI solutions might bear. The result is a more cost effective, efficient, and easier to manage solution for all your virtualization needs, whether it be desktop or applications. Another important thing, I think I mentioned this earlier, the fact that you have one singular licensing model. So whether it be support, whether it be particular use cases, all of it come under one framework within a Parallels ROS use case or a Parallels ROS user. So you don't have to actually pay for anything extra, but just have one license, the environment deployed, managed, and everything can be taken care of simply and cost efficiently. All right, that was a bit about the differences between Citrix and RAS, of course. Now I just quickly want to dive deeper from a schematic or a diagram perspective on how RAS architecture really looks like, and then of course give you a good rundown on a practical play of the tool as well. So the core strength of Parallels RAS is in its simple, flexible, and scalable architecture. Whether you're deploying on-prem, in the cloud, or using a hybrid setup, Parallels RAS makes it incredibly easy to manage and deliver remote applications and desktops. It's built to ensure high performance, strong security, and a smooth user experience. One of the best parts is that you can access RAS from almost any device, whether it's Windows, Mac OS, Android, or of course, Apple as well. We offer both options, either a lightweight client for full functionality, or of course, an HTML5 based access as you see over here. Of course, you have personal devices like phones or iPads, whereas client can easily be installed in those devices as well. So, of course, that's from a user-based perspective. You have very easy, simpler accessibility from different devices and different operating systems, which is great. And then, of course, if you look at the heart of RAS in itself, a built-in user portal is, of course, giving you full access to your apps and desktops, but easier manageability. So everything can be managed from this one singular management console, whether it be load balancing, whether it be single and multi-tenancy management, out-of-the-box integration with Microsoft Azure or AVD, SAML integration. Everything can be taken care of by this middle portion, which you could call the heart of Parallels RAS, or just in a single word, the management console of Parallels RAS. Of course, I will give you an overview of what this management console really looks like and how easy it is to manage from a product perspective or from a demo as well. But if you look on the right over here, on what kind of resources are we able to deploy via RAS? We are not limited to desktops or apps or the types of apps as a whole, whether it be an RDS session host, whether it be a remote PC or a VDI desktop as a whole, an AVD environment that you want to deploy, or all types of applications, whether it's a SaaS application that you want to kind of, securely access via infrastructure, like via a remote infrastructure, or of course, have a much more legacy application or a local application that you want to SaaSify or put on the cloud via our tool or via a solution like ROS. It's something that we can totally accommodate for. Now, of course, before I get into the demo, I'd love to give you a quick snapshot of some of the partners or technology partners that we collaborate with across the EUC space. As you see, Parallels is tightly connected with a wide ecosystem. This means better integration, stronger support, and ultimately more choice for you and your customers. If you see this last picture over here, before, of course, we start diving into the demo, throughout the presentation, we discussed our range of clients. I'm sure you remember me talking about different operating systems that we can work on, whether it be Windows, Mac OS, Android, HTML5 based, or Linux. As you see on the screen over here, the interface displays various resources assigned to us based on a group membership. We can access published applications, desktops, and folders seamlessly. And again, of course, interact with a single client that aggregates the resources regardless of their origins. Behind the scenes, these may come from different locations, from AVD, from an on-prem setup, or from the cloud, but everything can be managed from a single console, but also accessed from a singular portal. And that's what I'm going to show you in a bit. Right, I think it's the time to get into a much more practical overview through a demo. And I'm just quickly going to go back to see if we have any comments or any questions that I can address. Not that I see right now, so that's okay. So let me retry sharing my screen. All right, let me try doing that again. So my screen. There we go. Perfect. Oh, so this is my demo environment. As you can see, I have not installed anything on my personal device. I just wanted to give you an overview of what the actual experience really looks like from a browser-based experience. So something that I don't want to install anything on my personal device, but again, access it seamlessly via my web browser. Again, I'll just log into my credentials. Something that you can add on as a security level is MFA. Again, if that's more important to you, it just makes life easier, and of course gives you that OTP that you can leverage, whether through an authenticator on as an app, or of course a private authenticator that you might be using. So that again adds on to the security layer. Of course, you can also link this with SSO just to make logins much more easier and secure. All right, so this is what the environment really looks like. As you can see, the colors, the labels, everything can be adapted to your own company's branding. So don't worry about that. The look and the feel can all be adjusted or modified. But the best way to really look at this tool, guys, would be from a user perspective. So I'm going to touch upon a few use cases, each, of course, highlighting particular capability of ROS. And of course, I'm sure you might have some questions around this demo, around this tool. Please feel free to put them on the chat box or the comments, and I'll try to address them as we go. All right, having said that, let's really look at it from the first use case perspective, which is a remote working employee wanting to access a certain remote application to work securely. Let's look at it from that perspective first. So if you were to go on applications, so as you can see, let's go back and see how everything is under one console. As you see, whether it be a VDI or whether it be applications, you can also add AVD here, and then of course console. So everything is easier to access from one place. So that's what we said, aggregates everything. Now, if you look at a remote application that I want to access, there are different types of applications. Of course, let's look at an application like Home Bank, for example, which is a legacy application. Of course, a lot of uh, admin work that can be done there. But at the same time, this, of course, again, just gives you a virtual application like a legacy application like Home Bank. Again, easy to access via your own browser. As you can see, the look and the feel in itself is pretty straightforward, but at the same time, um, yeah, you're not limited to a singular type of application. Apologies for this. So of course, Home Bank was just one of many. Let me just go back and show you a particular application which might require a few or a bit more of graphically intensive use case. Now look at Krita. Krita is much more of a graphic or a drawing or a graphical. I just want to give you an overview of how it would look like from a RAS usability perspective. So I'm just going to open a new file, create. Again, the reason I'm just trying to show this to you is to give you an idea of how there is no lag. And yeah, it just makes remote application accessibility much more efficient. So you're not limited to particular types of applications. As you saw, we were first looked at Home Bank, which is a much more legacy-based application. And then, of course, you have solutions like Krita or other applications, whether it be SaaS or on-prem. Everything can easily be deployed under one singular interface. Of course, I would love to show you a few more applications, but I'll run them down as we go into the different other use cases. So this was the first use case, a remote working employee wanting to access a remotely hosted application. That can be done. Now let's look at it from a second use case perspective. A user working remotely but just wants to have access to the fully remotely hosted PC, and then of course work on it like it's like I'm working on my own office PC, but I'm working remotely. You can easily deploy that as you see something that we call as a session-based VDI in Parallels ROS terms. As you can see, I have a Windows uh, 10 or Windows 11 PC personally. And in this, I've hosted or I'm working on a remotely hosted Windows 10 PC. As you see, I can go full screen just so it gives me a complete uh, experience of working on a desktop. And as you can see, I can easily either access applications like Home Bank, which I showed you earlier, just the application. So I can easily start having access to those applications via the desktop itself, or of course, even do any form of browsing or desktop related work within this remotely hosted VDI. Again, makes life and makes life much more easier, but at the same time gives you a much more stronger streamlined virtual desktop usability. I hope there are no questions in regards to these two use cases, but the reason I showed you applications and desktops differently was just to give you an idea. Either if you want to have access to just applications which are remotely hosted, you can work on that, or of course, not limit yourselves to desktops, or if you can have a completely remotely hosted desktop and access whatever you want to, whether it be apps or browser stuff within those desktops, you can do that as well. Unlike Citrix, again, just to go back on the Citrix differentiator, whereas you have Citrix Zen Desktop and Zen Apps, RAS keeps everything much more simpler. All right, so we looked at two different use cases. Now let's really look at it from a management side of things. Now, as a system admin or an IT admin, how would I really set up this environment? Again, we at Parallels try to focus on simplicity, and that is how I'm going to show you the management, how easy it is to manage, but at the same time, how easy it is to deploy and run the admin side of things from Parallels ROS. So if you see over here, I clicked on the Parallels ROS management console, which I hope opens up in a bit. Okay, I got logged out. So you see, it's called the Parallels RAS console. It seems to be taking some time to open up. There we go. So as you see over here, everything is self-explanatory in many ways in terms of the terminologies that you see, but I'm going to dive deeper into each of these elements that you see over here. Starting off from the farm. Oh. I don't know if it's my PC. Okay, there we go. I hope this should be better. Yeah. So as you see the farm over here, everything that you've hosted, all the elements that you've hosted, would be remote PCs, RD session hosts, secure gateways, everything can be looked at or managed from this singular farm site. Of course, as you see over here, we have certain RD session hosts, some amount of VDI, AVDs connected, but everything can be looked at and managed from a singular farm environment, as you see over here. And then, of course, we can also look at sessions that are active, as you see right here. My colleague Dave was active a few minutes ago, if I'm correct. Yeah, a few hours ago. And everything in terms of users, how they're working, what sessions are active, what sessions are inactive, everything can be looked at from this session space over here. Coming to load balancing, I just want to emphasize Citrix might use load balancers, whereas ROS really comes with an inbuilt load balancer. Of course, my technical engineer would be able to dive deeper into how we handle those load balancings, but at the same time, I'm just going to give you an overview that ROS comes with an inbuilt load balancer just to make your life easier when it comes to, of course, handling multiple different sites, multiple different users, and of course, at an enterprise level. Now, this is the more important part, which is publishing. I can imagine that there are solutions, particularly traditional VDI solutions, which are so complex to manage, but even complex to even deploy certain applications and desktops. I'll show you how easy it is from a RAS perspective. Again, as you see, this is the publishing space. I have no servers connected, so I'll just give you an overview of how easy it is to do from a buttons perspective. As you see, when I clicked on publish, RAS itself gives me an overview of whether I want to deploy a web application, an app v, or of course, a desktop or just an application itself. Let's look at application just to see what we get. And then, of course, select the source, where the actual source is. If you look at local device or RD session host, let's look at RD session host for now. And of course, single application. Of course, I don't have any servers connected. Installed applications. Let's try doing that. Perfect. Now, if you see over here, there are a lot of different applications. So let me see if I can host Zoom. So as you see, the application was published. Let me quickly go back to that environment. Just to show you how easy it would be to access the Zoom environment now. Let's see. Okay, let's try going to the desktop environment. Okay, I have to close this. All right, so I'm going to close this and reopen it. Yeah. My connectivity issues seem to be taking over me today, but I hope I'm able to show this to you. Yeah. All right. I think it's a bit slow, so I'm just going to go back, and since we're also running out of time, go back and show you the console elements again on from a publishing perspective, and hopefully towards the end, if my connection is good, I will show you how those applications have been published. Let's do it that way. So again, going back to publishing, again, as you saw, it was pretty easy to publish resources. The latest resource that we published was Zoom. Again, it's from a click of a button, whether it's desktops, applications, web apps, even documents. I forgot about documents. Everything can easily be deployed under one singular environment. Again, so we looked at publishing, but really looking at other aspects as well, whether it be universal printing, which is again an additional important feature that I forgot to mention. You can use your personal printers, whether you're working remotely, again, makes your life way much easier. So the advantage of universal printing is something not to be overlooked, but at the same time, device management. So you can actually allow certain devices actually look at which devices are within the environment, and of course gives you a strong overview of everything that is utilizing this environment. Something we should not forget is also talk about policies. So RAS gives you the ability to deploy certain policy or security policy elements. For example, you can copy and paste from outside to inside the environment, but nothing from the inside to the outside. So I think those policy elements again make your life much more secure when you're working around a tool like ROS. Of course, what I don't want to forget showing you is the monitoring and reporting part. So to give you an idea, ROS also allows you to again monitor everything from a CPU usage perspective and the session perspective, but at the same time report everything in regards to again making life much more easier from a logging and of course user reporting point of view for admins or system architects behind the scenes. And of course, the entire license model or license handling can also be done within this singular management console as well. Let me try going a bit back now and see if I can. There we go. Now, if you see Zoom over here, the application that I published, I can easily start working on it. There was an issue with the session-based VDI, but as you see, the application itself was deployed. So what I wanted to show you was with a click of a button, connected with the right server and the right sources, you can easily deploy the applications that you're looking to work on. All right, this was in a nutshell the entire usability for Parallels ROS. I'm sure you have questions. I'm sure there are elements that I've not covered from a technical point of view. But again, more than happy to discuss them. If you have questions in regards to that, please put them on the chat comment section or a chat box if required. Or of course, personally reach out to me and I'll try to go deeper from a demo perspective, or of course involve one of our senior engineers to give you a much more technical understanding of the tool. Having said that, I'd love to go back to my presentation deck. Okay. Perfect. All right. So what could be the next steps? You've seen how we help you out with RAS in terms of what makes us different from a usability, costs, simplicity point of view. You've seen RAS from a practical overview on how we actually make it easy to deploy, manage, and of course handle different use cases from a remote access point of view as well. The next steps that I would propose for you would be to try it out for yourself. How would you do that? We have plenty of resources online. As you see over here, these links, I will also put them on the chat box, but these easily give you an overview of course, firstly, from a blog perspective of what makes us different from Citrix, but also, of course, the entire migration tool that allows easy to understand elements from Citrix translated to how it could become, of course, migrated towards RAS. We also have a set of few Tech Bytes videos, as you see over here, that I can also share with you. There are, of course, a range of different videos around how you could actually talk about, or at least visually look at moving from Citrix to RAS, or Citrix, or away from Citrix as a whole. Thanks, Louis, for that. Yes, the entire webinar can be rewatched through LinkedIn. That's correct. And of course, I'll share these links with the right people. And whoever clicked on attend, whoever was not able to join, that's totally fine. I'll share this personally with you as well, so you can take your time to look at it. What we want is to make sure that you are aware of this simpler product out there in the market. My colleague Louis, who's our senior pre-sales engineer, also comes from the world of Citrix and traditional VDI, and we are so happy to have him because he brings the expertise of what or a complex solution really is, and how easy it can be managed from a RAS perspective. So please feel free to either reach out to me or, of course, Louis in regards to any additional technical questions that you might have. But at the same time, I hope and I wish that whoever joined us today got some better understanding of our tool, and more than happy to connect on a personal note to see how we can at least help you evaluate um, a much more cost effective and simpler alternative to your current Citrix environment. With that, I would like to conclude today's discussion. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Um, More than happy to connect, and let's stay in touch. Wish you all a lovely, lovely rest of the day. Thank you so much. Again, as you see right here, there's a barcode. If you personally want to connect with me, you can easily scan that. Thank you.